This is the Waterford Historical Society Oral History Project interview of Pat Powers on January 26, 2017, at the home of Lynn Troy in Lower Waterford. The interviewers are David Morrison, Donna Ray Heath, and Lynn Troy.
All set?
Okay, you were born in what year, Pat?
I was born 1926, April 25th, 1926.
And were you born in Upper Waterford, or?
I was born in Littleton, New Hampshire.
At a hospital or a private home? Or?
I'm sorry?
At a hospital or a private home?
At
or?
Littleton Hospital.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about your early years in Upper Waterford.
Well, that's a long time ago. But my mother evidently was interested in the Wallaces had two children who they had adopted, and Frank Wallace was one of those children, and he's the one that she had been divorced from her first husband and married Frank Wallace. That's how we got connected with the Wallace family. And I'm sure that I lived there very early. Probably I was 2 to 3 years old, because I have a picture of myself going into the church there in Upper Waterford. And we lived at the Wallace farm, and the Wallaces at that time were getting a little older, and I'm sure that my mother was probably a big help to them at the time, because I can remember when Mr. Wallace had, well, I guess today you would call it dementia or whatever, but he got lost in the woods and got hung up on a barbed wire fence. And they eventually found him, of course, and he was not in very good condition, but I can't remember just how long it was. He died not too long after that, and I just remember my mother being there for him and for the family.
So was that Frank Wallace that you're speaking
Yes.
of? Okay.
They also adopted a girl, and her name was Lillian Root from St. Johnsbury. She became Lillian Priest later on. She married Fred Priest. And they at one time lived in the apartment upstairs over the store, where the store and post office was. I lived there at the Wallace farm with my mother and a stepfather. Went to the Upper Waterford school up until I was probably 10 years old. And then, because of the power company taking the land and the houses and everything, we moved from there. So I don't know what else you would like to know about.
Well, what was your birth name then?
My birth name was Patricia Lyon.
Lyon?
Yeah, okay. Lyon.
So your stepfather was Norton?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I knew Norton.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Norton and Mamie. So, except for this adopted girl, did you have other siblings?
I had a brother, Harold Lyon, and a sister, Valda Lyon. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are they still with us, or?
No, they're both gone.
Okay. Did they live locally, or?
My brother lived in Brownington most of his life, and my sister was in that area for a while, and then lived in Texas for a long time. Mm-hmm.
So tell us about the little one-room school in Upper Waterford.
The little Upper Waterford school. That was a long time ago, but I do remember. I remember the inkwells and the pens. And I remember the teachers having a lot of, they could keep you in line. There was one boy in particular that seemed to have a little trouble, and they used to have to do a few things to him to keep him
The strap and the ruler,
keep
maybe?
him going. Yeah, yeah.
How many
But,
years were you in that school?
Well, only like, let's see, I was 6 years old when I would have gone in the first grade, and I was 6, 7, 8, 9, I was 10, so probably grade 4 or 5 when we left there. But then I finished my elementary school in Lower Waterford. And then I went on to St. J Academy, graduated 1944, and
That makes us all 20 years apart.
Yeah.
We're 64 graduates.
uh-huh.
Tell us about the little place on the Bullock farm, the little bungalow we were speaking
Oh,
about.
well, after we moved from the Wallaces in Upper Waterford, we lived in a place that belonged to one of the Bullocks, Arthur Bullock, between where Jerry Bullock lived and where Fred and George lived. It was a place that he owned, and we lived there probably during my time in high school, probably 6 years. And then I went on to a school in Providence, Rhode Island, after I graduated from the academy, Providence Bible Institute. And Russell was in the service. He was in the Army for 18 months. Then we ended up getting married, and we lived in Franklin, Massachusetts after we got married. He worked for Gorelick Brothers Farm, and we had a nice little home in Franklin, Mass. But then he decided he wanted to come back to the farm. So Russell and his brother Willard bought up some property, and actually where we live now, where Willard lives now and where I live, and they farmed together for 30 years. And then because of my sister-in-law's passing, things changed, and there were others who did a little of the farming, but farms sort of went out, and that's what happened to ours.
So when you were on the Bullock place, that's probably where you and Lina became
Yes.
really good.
Yes.
Really good friends. So did you? I mean, Upper Waterford and the Glen Powers place isn't too far apart. Did you know Russell as a child growing up, or was?
Not when I lived in Upper Waterford.
Oh,
I didn't. No, not until, like I told you earlier today, your father used to go around and pick up young people and bring them to what we called Christian Endeavor at the church or the Sunday school, and he would go and get children in so many different places, and I was one of them, and Lina, of course, and a lot of the Bullocks, and we were always grateful for all that he did.
So that would have been starting in '36, because the church had been closed for like 11 years.
It would have been yes,
Starting
it
in
would have
36.
started in 1936. Yeah,
So you'd have been just 10 then.
yeah.
Yeah. Was the church not in Upper Waterford not operating, or was?
I think that there was a pastor in Littleton who used to come over and hold services. I really can't remember that part of it. I just know that the doors were open, so they must have had someone.
But most of your religious life was in Lower Waterford as a child.
I would say so, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Did the Wallaces farm in Upper
Yes,
Waterford?
they did farm. Yes, they did farm. And but it was the time when I was there. Like I said, they were getting older, and had given up. Well, Mrs. Wallace, Flora Wallace, who was my step-grandmother, operated the post office, and then they both worked in the store. So that's what I remember about them.
So were there other grandparents around besides Flora and Frank Wallace? Were there, like your mother's parents?
Oh yes, my mother's family lived in Holland, Vermont, and we would go up there quite often. I had cousins, and yes, I have lots of memories of my grandma's house. Yes.
How did they heat back then? Did you all heat with wood, or?
Oh yes, they did. Yeah, they. As far as I can remember, that wood was what we used for heat, and yeah.
How about refrigeration?
I just remember, like I had mentioned earlier today, the big blocks of ice. I mean, they were big, that they would cut from the river. And we had an ice chest that you put the block of ice in, and it would have pans underneath for the dripping, but that was your refrigerator, and seemed to work pretty well.
So in a village like that, was there somebody that kind of had an ice house that sold ice to the other residents, or how did that work?
That part I can't really remember. I just remember them having the ice, and I don't know whether there was, or somebody just shared it, because one block would last quite a while, a large block of ice. Yeah.
What did they have for neighborhood family gatherings back then? Did you have a lot
I think
of
they
social-
had a lot. I wish that
social
we
stuff?
had, I'm sorry?
A lot of social stuff?
Yes, they did, yeah. I think I mentioned in the article that I have there, we had a lot of parties at the school. I remember they had the square dances. They would have those quite often, and they had Halloween parties and Christmas parties. And the church in Lower Waterford, I just remember wonderful Christmas parties in the vestry there. Well, your dad used to get the big Christmas tree, and it was just so great to get that present off the tree, because back then we didn't have all the presents that kids get today. It was a totally different thing. But anyway, we did have a lot of gatherings. And
At the church and all? Did they have gatherings at the little school in Lower Waterford, the one that still exists?
I don't remember them in the school there. I remember them in the vestry at the church. Yeah. And we would have,
Did electricity come to Upper Waterford while you were still there?
Oh, I'm sorry. Electricity. I don't think so. I mean, I was pretty young when I was there, but I don't recall. I just remember the lamps, and I don't think it did. I'm not sure about that, but I don't think we had it.
Where did your food come from? There was a little store, and I mean, if you farmed, you probably made some of your own food, either livestock or gardens.
Well, people didn't run to the store every time they needed something. And when you went to the grocery store, it wasn't the self-service that we have now. It was going up to the counter and telling the grocer what your list was, and he would go and get your items. And but I think they probably did most of their grocery shopping in Littleton or St. Johnsbury. And then the country stores would have had, a certain amount, but I'm not sure. I just remember, all the good food that we had.
And what kind of store was the store your
It would be like a country store.
where the candy counter?
Candy counter. They had the candy counter, and
They have Frosted crackers?
yeah. Oh yes, I remember the cross crackers. Yeah, the round crackers that were so good in oyster stew.
Were you ever in the store that my grandparents had?
Yes, I was. I've seen your grandfather, your grandfather, William Morrison. Yeah, I've seen him whittle away on the wood and the wonderful things that he would make. Yes, I remember that.
Where was that store?
The building behind the church. It's now that big yellow
up
house.
in-
but
at
it used to
Lower
be a
Waterford.
small- Yes,
Okay.
because she was just down the road on the Bullock place at that point. You were only a year old for the 27 flood, so I won't ask you about that. But how about the 38 hurricane? Where were you at the time, and what effect did it
The
have on you?
38 hurricane, we were living in the Lower Waterford
In the bungalow?
residence, yeah.
Arthur Bullock's
Yeah,
place? Yeah.
near the Bullocks,
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, I remember it, and I remember the trees, so many of them being laid down flat. But I didn't really understand the impact of the whole thing, back then.
Yeah. How about high school? You mentioned you had gone to the academy. Any particular memories of the academy in that era?
I do, yes.
Did you board?
I'm sorry?
Did you travel or board?
Well, my first 2 years, I stayed with a family in St. Johnsbury. And then my third year, I think we traveled. And then my fourth year, there were three others, Lina Bullock and Helen Bullock and Audrey Powers and myself, and we had an apartment on Mount Pleasant Street in St. Johnsbury, and went to the academy. Yeah.
Who had the car back then, or did any young people have cars, or was it always a...
Russell and Willard, of course, they drove their parents' car to the trade school,
Okay.
and quite often we would ride with them. Whoever else we were able to ride with.
So you mentioned meeting and marrying Russell down in Providence.
No, we were married in Lower Waterford Church.
Oh, okay. But you had met down...
Well, with all the gatherings at the church back when we were teenagers, it's where we first were interested in each other, I guess. And then as time went on, yes, I can't think for sure, but well, when we went to school at the academy and rode with them, of course, our relationship grew. And then after his time in the service, we were married. So,
Who was the minister at the local church that married
at
you?
Lower Waterford,
Was it Reverend Barr? Or,
Mr. Parker, Albert Parker.
Albert Parker, right?
Yeah, and there was another man, Mr. Verhove, who
Oh, yes.
traveled around and
Yeah, very good friends of my folks.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I remember them. He used to sing. He had a wonderful voice.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, he did.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So was Russ in the service during a war, or
Yeah, well,
was it World War II?
it was actually after. Well, it was 1945 to 1947. He went in September 1945 and came out January or February of 47.
So the war would have been over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Where was he stationed?
Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and there was another one. I can't remember the other one. Anyway, I know he was at Fort Bragg. Uh-huh.
And then you started your family when he came home.
We were married in June after I graduated, and he came out of the service. Yeah. The next year, Ron, our oldest boy, was born.
And that's when you were in Massachusetts.
Yes, we lived in Franklin, Mass. Yeah.
How many children did you have?
I had 7, but our second child only lived a week. She was a Down syndrome baby, and her heart evidently wasn't something wrong there anyway. But I had twin girls, so we had a busy household for a while.
Yes.
So was Judy born in Massachusetts or up here?
Ron, excuse me, Ron and Judy and Dan were born, and Lois, the one that didn't make it, were born in Attleboro, Mass. And then Sandy and Sharon, the twins, and Kevin were born at Bright Look Hospital. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Donna, you got some questions you'd like to ask of Pat?
Yeah, you're talking about social activities. I was wondering, did you ever have weenie roast? Do you remember weenie roast out in the fields at night?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Wiener roast, hot dog roast. Did they ever have, or like marshmallow roast? Or?
Oh,
Out in the field.
oh, you mean where? In Upper Waterford?
Yeah, well, any of the.
Oh, we did that more after we had children, I think. I don't remember too much of that growing up, but we did a lot of that with the children. Yeah.
Do hay rides?
Hay rides?
Hay rides, yes, we did do hay rides. Yeah, we had the young people over from different places, and they always enjoyed that.
Probably been loose hay back then.
Yeah.
And not big.
Right. Oh, yeah. The haying was different. Everything was different.
And the farming you did was cows?
After we were married, you
Yeah.
mean? Yes. We had a dairy farm, about 70 or more milkers.
Did you do any of that, or you're busy?
No.
Too busy with kids.
That's one thing I always said. I just felt that my place was in the home, so I tried to do, what was needed there and to care for the children. Did a lot of traveling when they, went different places because I did drive, and So like they do today, they still keep busy, going here and there.
I kind of skipped over the Depression years. You wouldn't have been very old, but do you have particular memories of how the family managed during the Depression?
I remember them talking about it. I was pretty young, but I do remember them talking about it, and I remember my mother making something she called a depression plant. It was in a bowl, and she used coal as a base, and I'm not sure what the other things were that she poured in there, but then it would start growing. It'd be different colors, and it would fill the bowl. It was called a depression plant. And I just remember that people were having hard times, and I remember them talking about Franklin Roosevelt and all the different plans he had. And
WPA,
yeah.
CCC.
Right, yeah. One thing I do remember is that they called them gypsies. They would travel around and stay wherever they could. They were called, I don't know why they called them that, but I just remember one day I was coming home from school. This is in Upper Waterford. I would have been like 8 years old, maybe. And I was like 3/4 of the way home, and I heard a vehicle coming. These people would go and they would stay in people's barns. They would do all kinds of different things, and I was afraid of them. And I heard a vehicle coming, and so I dashed up onto the side of the road and hid behind a bush until they had gone by. After they'd gone by, I, of course, made my way home, but I had heard so many things about them that I didn't want them picking me up. But yes, the Depression years, I'm sure, were very, very hard. And people struggled for a living. Yeah.
When you lived on the Bullock place, where did Norton work?
He had different jobs. He was a very good mechanic, and he could do a lot of mechanical work. He actually graduated from mechanic school in Michigan. But he also did a lot of wood cutting, logs, and did a lot of that type of work. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was very handy. He built a sawmill up next to where you live there now.
Well, yeah, he was in the service. He was in World War I, and he was in the trenches, over in France, and he would tell about some of the sad situations and things that he saw. I believe that he could have had a little of the after effects of that, because sometimes, it was a little difficult. But anyway, he was gifted in many areas. And, yeah.
Do you have any memories of some of the other people in the area that you're growing up?
I remember a lot of the people in Upper Waterford, yes. I can almost go to every house and think of the people that lived there. And I think I mentioned in, I guess, a poem that I wrote, the Crow family who lived where the picnic area is now. There was a house there. Mr. Crow worked for Harley Pike, who had a farm. And they had 4 or 5 daughters. The youngest daughter was Thelma Crow, and we were friends, and I would go up to her house and play, or she would come down to my house, and we would have lots of fun.
Is she the one you made the mud pies with?
Yes. And there were a lot of others, the Cassidy family, the Stone family. Yeah, there were.
Lingering on to my era, I remember just the name of Jackie Stone.
Yeah,
Where was
she was a mother.
Okay.
She was the mother, and
She
I
ran
have a
farm?
picture of their house. Yeah,
That
they.
was down this way from the village.
No, you went up through toward Concord, and I guess I mentioned that the road split at the end of the street there. And the Pike farm was the Pike house was on the right. And then right at the very end was where the Stone family lived. Then on the left, if you kept going, you would go into Concord. Now you can go on that road and see where the road goes down in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she was the mother of the Stone family. Mm-hmm.
How about the neighbors down from Lower Waterford down this way towards the Bullocks?
Oh yeah, I remember Carlisle Morrison and Robert Morrison, and all the ones that were in the school. Of course, the Bullock family, all of them, Jerry Bullock, and I've forgotten how many we had in the school, but I had Clara Oben, who would have been
my aunt.
Your aunt, or a teacher in the 7th and 8th grades, and she was excellent teacher. We all loved her. Yes.
Yeah, she had taught up to the Wood School before she came.
Yes, she did.
Down there. So I don't think Russell ever had. Well, Russell might have had her. Russell never had my mother, but Willard had mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when your mother came to town.
39. 39.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you can recall the approximate population of Upper Waterford when you were growing up there.
Oh, boy. I don't, it's hard for me to, I remember the families, but I would have to stop and write down the numbers of each family member, I guess. But there
It was
were
a thriving, small town, village.
probably 60, 70, I don't know. Maybe more than that. There were quite a few houses, actually.
Well, by the time you were born, the village probably was in its wane because of the plans for the dam and
Yeah, they were already.
already losing land or losing places.
Yeah, they had already bought up property, I think, and yes, I remember a large sign where the Wallace farm was. It was on a corner, and right there at the corner, there was a large sign that told about what was coming, the development of the. It didn't say Moore Dam. It was the New England Power Company, I think, or whatever. That would be developing there. So I believe that where the bank goes across the dam, where the bank goes across, that on the Vermont side is where the farm was. Of course, it's all built up there, but there's a road along the river that goes up
Now
there.
you referred to your Wallace
Yeah,
farm?
right. Mm-hmm.
Under the earth fill, okay.
Mm-hmm.
When the power company, or even what preceded that, was buying places, did they immediately destroy them, or did they rent them out?
No, people lived in their homes for some time after, because it was in the 20s, I think. They started buying them up, and it was in the 30s when I would have been there. I believe there could have been some of them that, immediately, but as I remember, I just remember the families being able to live in their homes until the time that they would start the dam.
Was there a Bumps family there when you were young?
The Bumps family lived up near the Powers farm, where Mrs. Earl lived.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure that's where the Bumps lived.
Because as a child, I remember going up with Dad picking corn down on the flats towards the river, and there was a Bumps farming there, and there was two Bumps children, Henry and Ruby, that came, but this is like 52.
Yeah, that's
They were
right.
still they were living in Upper Waterford then, I think.
Yeah, they would have been in the Lower Waterford
Right.
school. Yeah.
Do you know what year that school closed? The Upper Waterford.
Upper Waterford? No, I don't exactly. I think it does tell, though, in some of the book that I have, maybe. It would have been 40s, 50s, in the 40s, I think.
When did you start writing poetry?
Oh, I don't even, I'm not a poet. I just, when you get older and you can't do all the things that you used to do, you know, and you like to keep your mind active, I just one day thought, I'm going to try writing a poem because I have a granddaughter, Tricia, who is very good at it. And so I started and I kept on writing till I had about 40 or 50 poems, I guess.
It's wonderful. Geneva let us read one that you had written.
Oh, the one for the...
the 90.
the
year-old.
90s,
Yeah, wonderful poem. And then there's a wonderful one in here.
Oh, that
And I'm referring to the North Star, November 2016. I'm going to show this. It takes a village with Pat Powers on the cover. And a lovely article written by her. Who is it, your granddaughter?
Tricia, yes.
By
She's
her
my
granddaughter.
granddaughter.
Patricia Pennypacker.
Yes.
Did a lovely job. Some wonderful pictures in here as well.
Yeah, the school and
Yeah.
Any other questions, Donna?
No. I was 10 when we left there, so the memories that I have were all good memories, and I don't really know what their feeling was, but I can imagine that it was a hard thing for them to give up their homes, and I don't imagine that they got a lot for their properties. So I'm sure that it was difficult. There were some really good farms. The Pike Farm, Leon Johnson had a nice little dairy farm. Of course, the Wallaces, but as they grew older, they gave up on theirs. But I'm sure it was not easy.
So, Pat, we want to thank you very much for sharing your life with us. And if there's anything else you want to add, we will pause this and you can let us know as you're leaving. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Your question.
Yeah. Any memories of Pattonville?
Pattonville, I do remember a little bit of it. I remember when you went across the Iron Bridge, you turned right. And I remember some of the families that lived along the way there. It was probably 2 or more miles before you got to where the pond was, Pattonville Pond. And some of the ice used to come from Pattonville Pond, I think. Yeah. But, yeah, we were friends with a lot of the people over on that side. And then there was Morris Moore, who lived across the river, who was a friend for... He used to come over to our place when we were sugaring.
Yeah, I remember
and
Morris.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And then his son and family, too. I don't have a lot of memories, but I just remember that.
Was he in Pattonville or up on the road where you folks used to plant
He
corn?
wouldn't have been right in the village. No, he would have been a little more to the other side. Yeah.
Was it a sizable village? I mean, like Upper Waterford? Or?
Not as, I don't believe it was as big. And I think that the school was moved to Littleton. Someone had it over there.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.